Okay, folks, so this is the second part of the Principles of Economics, going through Chapter 1. We're going to be looking at factors 5 to 10, and they're divided up into two parts: how people interact and how the economy works as a whole. So just a quick review that there was a key consideration or concept of economics that we need to consider. And as I mentioned before, this is it for our style of economics. It's the concept or the idea of scarcity, that there are unlimited wants but limited supplies, and there's only so much there. Also reviewing that economics is primarily concerned with the movement of wants, and that would be goods and services from one place to another. So keep that in mind. I use a technical term for the goods, which is goodies. Now, in economics, one of the great questions is how can we provide the most benefit for the largest amount of people? And this is what we're going to try to answer with this. So, as part of the answer to that question, economic principle number 5 comes into play, which is that trade can make everyone better off. Trade is the crowning glory of the neoliberal economic system that we've all part of that we've all inherited. And with trade, we organize it through, and this is economic principle number 6, we use through markets. And as it says here, markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. Now, when we speak of markets, most of you will probably think of the literal brick and mortar shop that may be not too far from where you live, or that possibly some of you work with, like a 7-Eleven store or a Best Buy or an H Mart or something like that. That's the everyday common use of the word market. But when we speak about economics, market has a much larger blanket, so to speak. Markets really in economics are any place where people and businesses trade goods or services. There is a market for everything. Let us just say we don't have a pandemic on us and you want to get your hair cut. Well, you would then enter into the market for haircuts. And in the market of haircuts here in Southern California, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of different places we can go to within that marketplace. We can go down the street to Ken the Barber. We can go down to Beverly Hills to a very fancy Sassoon hair salon. We can go down to your neighbor's mother who knows how to cut hair, and so forth. All of these are a market, and all of these markets are in competition with one another. And of course, quality may differ, price may differ, conditions within may differ, and so on and so forth. And you enter into the marketplace and you make your decision based upon your needs, the prices, or that is to say, well, let's face it, the opportunity cost of going to that. And again, there's markets for flat screen televisions. You can go down to Amazon, which is a virtual marketplace, but that's part of the market. You can go to Best Buy. You can go to Target. You can go to a fancy electronic shop, and so on and so on and so forth. Markets have been found to literally hundreds, if not thousands of years, as one of the best way to organize our economic activities. However, sometimes markets are not the perfect way. Sometimes markets do fail. And there are many criticisms that we have about the market. So I'd like to share some of these criticisms here. For example, under free market capitalism, and we're speaking about now the market for homes, we end up with a very strange situation where we have people without homes and homes without people. Homes without people may be caused by, well, as you can see from the cartoon, by foreclosures. It may be because of high rents or high taxes on these homes, and it doesn't pay to have people living in them. But the inverse of that is that many people who should have homes don't have homes. A failure. Here's another example of failure of markets. What happens when the free market runs rampant over things that are important, like the banking industry, the auto industry, or housing? If a organization is able to charge whatever darn well please for, let's say, insulin that is needed for people to survive diabetes, well, I mean, if they're charging $1,000 a vial, people will die. People will suffer. Healthcare will go down. That's the power of the free market. But at the same time, what about the importance of people? Sometimes the free market can get very, very, very complicated. And that complication can destroy the goose that laid the golden age, so to speak. Most of you are probably aware that in the 90s we had something called the dot-com boom. And if you look at the crater all the way onto the top right, it shows it was destructive. People put in millions, billions of dollars into dot-coms, and the whole thing collapsed because we didn't have the internet infrastructure to make it work. The free market hurt people. Derivatives, which is a type of earnings made from investments, was another thing that people went for, and that collapsed, I think, around the turn of the century. Credit default swaps was partly responsible for the 2008 economic collapse from housing. And in this case, in this one, the magic of the free market, someone is pawning off super high frequency trading as the next miracle that's going to make everybody tons and tons of money. And the poor consumer there, who hasn't learned or who has no choice, is out there with his money. Yes, give me this. But the thing is that the free market doesn't quite work for everyone. There's also something called the tragedy of the commons, which is another thing that gets in the way of the free market. In this case, you have the free market fish pond. You have the fish who's saying, okay, I ate all the little fish, now what? And the tragedy of the commons is the fact that because of competition, it is possible for one group or a number of groups to get so large that they destroy the very industry that they were attempting to monopolize on. A literal example of this is what happened a few years ago when between the British and the French there was a minor war, a scallop war in the English Channel. And this is what the part of the article reads. French fishermen had been accused of throwing insults, rocks, and smoke bombs at their British rivals in the English Channel in a vicious scrap over scallops. The clash happened around 12 nautical miles off the Normandy coast near the Bay of Seine. British boats are legally entitled to fish in the scallop-rich area. But the presence has infuriated the French, who accuse the British of shamelessly depleting shellfish stocks. Now UK fishermen are demanding government protection while the French bewail the loss of a primary resource. In short, it's a full-blown scallop war. So depleting shellfish stocks due to shellfishness. Anyway, and this is an example of the tragedy of the commons. If both sides get their way and are able to fish for scalp as much as they want, eventually there is none left, and they both destroy their livelihood. Which begs the question, how far should capitalism go? How far should the free market be free without regulation? Here's an anti-capitalistic cartoon that I found a few years ago. Capitalism, the pundits of unlimited capitalism say that it works best when left alone. But sometimes it doesn't. 3 Mile Island where in the 1980s there was nearly a nuclear meltdown. The Love Canal up by New York, I believe Erie, New York, where chemicals had been left in the ground, houses then built on this land, and eventually it seeped up into the water and so forth, causing terrible distress on parents and especially on children. The housing bubble of of 2008 destroyed the livelihood of many people. Here in Cerritos, when it hit its height, I would walk to the school, and I would see people. I would see houses for sale, and people who had taken sledgehammers to the foreclosure signs in frustration, destroying them. People were angry. Asian sweatshops, where people get paid, just a few dollars per day. AIG, which was an insurance company, it stole from people. And the Ford Pinto, this is a horrible example where capitalism didn't work best when it worked alone, was where the gas tank was in back of the car, positioned in such a way that if somebody hit it from behind, the whole thing would shoot up in flames. Now here's the kicker. Ford knew that the Pinto would explode. The fix would have been very inexpensive, but they crunched the numbers and they realized that even if they were sued, it would cost them less than fixing the Ford Pinto. So people meant less than lives. The great question then is, what is the missing ingredient we need to correct free market capitalism? Because everyone has a different version of capitalism. Everyone sees it in a different way. Capitalism as described by capitalists, well, you have, two men toting guns with money bags, happy. If you're a socialist and you look at capitalism, well, you see it as the capitalist merely robbing the other person. Socialism is described by socialists as everybody with money. And socialism as described by capitalists, well, they're trying to steal the money that you have. So nobody seems to be happy. So how do we solve the problem? What is the missing ingredient that we need for capitalism's shortcoming? That brings us then to the next principle, number 7, that governments can sometimes improve market outcomes. Government is an important partner in our neoliberal system. We need government. Capitalists need government. It's an important part. And before I go into much detail, there are many people who criticize the government intervening in the market. For example, many people believe that as capitalism is responsible for unemployment, many folks believe that the government should just simply intervene and get rid of capitalism and bring in a different system, socialism, anarchy, libertarianism, communism, whatever it might be. There are many folks who believe that if the government puts too much help in, it's going to ruin folks. For example, on the left of this cartoon, it reads "The Big Government Answers," where one guy is screaming for more food. People are down in the pit in despair, and what is being thrown down to them is welfare. And this implies that once a person is on welfare, then that they will never get out. It's where they will live forever and ever. The free market answer, or those capitalists who don't believe in government intervention, say that no, what we need is freedom, 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 freedom. And what they mean by this is not freedom, for example, to do whatever you darn well please, but I mean the freedom of the market, to start your own business, to trade, whatever you'd like. And you have the guy screaming for more rungs. The idea of more freedom will make us more economically prosperous. Some believe that government meddling causes the free market to get lost in a sort of bureaucratic maze. the person saying, why is the price so high of milk? It's because they have to go through so many different regulations. The milk has to be um, gotten from cows of a specific health who have certain types of drugs and hormones in them. It has to be certain types of feed. They have to be inoculated in different ways, and so on and so on and so forth. If without all the regulations that we have, the argument is milk and other goods would be much, much cheaper because of government regulation. Shouldn't it just be the idea of let the market decide? And that's too bad. Which brings us to a phrase which is very much part of capitalism. It's a Roman phrase that means caveat emptor, which means when the buyer takes the risks and is responsible for checking the condition or the quality of the items purchased, or Latin, let the buyer beware. A true capitalistic idea of how the free market works is it's the responsibility of the customer to figure out whether or not the person selling them the goods is selling them something really good or really bad. Many of you may have had the example we have in our home of buying things from eBay, and it's not what it is advertised to be. We once bought some perfume that was advertised as being Chanel, but when we got it, it turned out to be nothing more than junk. It was a knockoff, and it was very clear that it wasn't worth anything. A capitalist of the old school would say, caveat emptor. It's your responsibility to find out, why are you going to shady people like that in the first place? While others say the government should intervene and keep these people from coming in. It's like this Blondie cartoon where the hot dog guy says, hey, today's special is 2 hot dogs for the price of 1. Wow, you got a deal. And you know a bargain when you see one. That'll be $15. The idea is caveat emptor. Dagwood should have asked the price first. He is responsible for his own actions. That's how it should be. Some people see both the free market and big government as problems. We see the free market destroying Wall Street and so forth, but at the same time, big government is destructive as well. What are we to do if both sides seem to be destructive and nothing works? Well, the answers for this would have been in the videos. This is from a organization called Prager University. This gentleman is speaking about the importance of capitalism and why it works and so forth, but you won't get to see that. But please, as soon as you can, go in and watch it from the website. And this is a rebuttal or a completely opposite line where they say that we should be rejecting capitalism. Again, I wish I could show you this in a classroom setting. I can. The reason why I can't show these, by the way, is because of copyright restrictions. I can only lead you to the websites. If I put this on my videos and they discover I'm broadcasting them, so to speak, then everyone gets in trouble. So I have to leave it as it is. Based on this, many of you may say, well, capitalism doesn't work. And are there then any alternatives to them? And the fact is that there are many, many, many alternatives to it. And many of the great philosophers and thinkers of our time have contributed to a wealth of knowledge, all the way from a writer in the Paris Commune in 1871 to Gandhi and Epicure and Pierre Rabhi and even Julian Assange, who you know of. We're not going to go through any of this right now, and with our shortened schedule this year, I don't think we'll be able to explore any of these. But keep in mind that the system that you're learning in this class is not the be-all and end-all. There are others. and keep that in mind. Economic principle number 8 is the standard of living is influenced by our ability to produce goods and services. That is to say, we can tell a richer country from poorer country, richer people from poor people, by the goods and services that they produce. The argument here from your textbook is productivity itself is different across countries, primarily due to technology and education. Here in the United States goes the argument, our technology is second to none, which is one of the reasons why we protect our technology so much from, let's say, corporate spying that may be done internally or externally. President Trump is, as part of his platform, is blaming China for trying to steal what we have. American education, although it has taken some beatings, is still considered among the best in the world. American education, universities, and so forth are far and above considered the best in the world. People come from all over the country, all over the world, to come here, or at least they used to. That has given us the edge to live a life that is that people from other parts of the world would kill to live. The ninth economic principle is that prices rise due to an excess amount of money in circulation. And this, I think, is probably the most true principle of all. And most of you are already aware of the phenomenon of inflation. The best way to show this is to explain this is to look at the inflation in Germany that took place in the 1920s. As all of you remember, every single one of you remembers from ninth grade world history, that in the 1920s, right at the heels of the First World War, the Allies imposed upon the Germans a sanctions, what's the word that just came out of my mind? It'll come back again. But forced the Germans to pay reparations for the war, which in American money now would have been close to a few $1 trillion. The Germans literally did not have the gold in order to do it. So they decided that they would stimulate their economy by putting more money into it. Putting more money into an economy is a tried and true method of getting people back to work. I mean, the $3 trillion stimulus that was brought in somewhere around April or May of last year was just that. You put money in people's pockets. People then will spend that money locally, down the street or down to the market, and everyone then with more money will be able to hire more people. Things get started. The Germans started doing that too, but unfortunately, they didn't have the sophistication we have, and thus they printed way too much money. So what happened in Germany was prices would, people would have more money in their pockets. They would start buying more, but the people down in the shops would realize that they are losing relatively more money, so they would raise their prices. The government realized, wow, look at this, we've got to stimulate the economy more. They put more money in the economy, prices rose again, more money was put in the economy, and until eventually between 1918 and 1929, the price of a mark, which is about 25 cents in American money back in the day, had gotten to astronomical levels. By 1923, $1 could buy 4 billion marks, because again, they were worth about a quarter, when before 25 cents would be able to buy you one. It got so bad by the 1920s that you literally had to be paid twice a day. Once in the morning, so when your morning shift was over, you can use it and spend it for food, because if you didn't, by the afternoon when you were paid again, prices had doubled, and so had your salary. And you can't keep this going when people are walking around with briefcase, wheelbarrows filled with money. Another way of putting this is that the more of something that exists, the less valuable it is. The more Reichsmarks that you put out there, the more dollar bills you put out there, the less money is worth. I mean, sugar, it's not worth much. You can buy 5 pounds for a few dollars in the store. We leave it out for the ants to eat and so forth. And it isn't worth much because there's so much of it. But something like a fine cut diamond is incredibly rare and thus is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The last of the economic principles, number 10, is that society faces a short-run trade-off between inflation and unemployment. According to Manquiv and other economists, we can't have both. If we want less unemployment, if we want zero unemployment, we are going to have to face inflation. And if we don't want any inflation, we want to keep prices down, then we're going to have to accept unemployment. So that's our trade-off, they say. This is how it works, okay? Putting more money into the economy will stimulate it. That is, more bucks to buy things, and that means more demand. Let's give an example of the recent money, $3 billion given to people. $600 extras in everybody's paycheck. The stimulus money, $1,200, $2,400. I got $2,400 on the stimulus. And that money is being used to buy things. So like the lady, she goes down to Target and buys all sorts of goodies. As she buys more stuff, she creates more demand. So, for example, if she's buying pillows, she's buying what looks like toilet paper and stuff like that. And that creates the demand for more. And businesses see that. The argument then is prices will rise because of high demand. After all, if suddenly people are buying your product and they want so much of it, it's only natural for you to raise your prices. You'll make more of a profit and can control the flow of the goods. So prices will rise because of demand, more goodies will be manufactured, and the argument is because people are buying more stuff with all the extra money. But that also means that more jobs will be available because, well, someone has to make all of the goodies. And that means more hiring and lower unemployment. So it is possible for the government to intervene. This is exactly what happened with the stimulus. People got money, more money went out in the economy, and now people went out there and started to work. And they were needed. People were called back to regain their jobs because they simply needed to bring them back. Now, governments often use the power of inflation and deflation, we actually do lower prices too, to change the employment situation in the short run, but not in the long run. You learn how they do this later in the course. They'll do it through the Fed, which is the Bank of the United States, so to speak. This is one reason why many in the Senate and some in the House are arguing against the second stimulus bill, which Pelosi and the Democrats have asked for an extra $3 trillion for. They argue that they're just trying to stimulate the economy and lower unemployment, while Republicans are saying, no, we've gone too far on this, and there's only a limit to how far this will go before the whole thing collapses. So it's better that we weather this crisis, not bring up a big stimulus, so that in the end, things will even be better. And both sides argue this. At the very beginning of the talk last week, I did say there's an ultimate goal in life. And you might think that the reason for living is, to do good or to make a lot of money and stuff like that. And economists would say, no, we have the answer to the ultimate goal in life. And most of you probably will disagree with it. I kind of disagree with it as well, but this is where economists come from. If you want to understand how things work, you better understand their ideas. And that is what is called maximizing utility, which absolutely means nothing to any of you. This is another way of saying by maximizing satisfaction, to make sure that people can have the most amount of happiness or satisfaction that it is possible to get. So to them, that means open markets where people can buy the goodies that they like, because that will maximize utility, that will make us more happy, and that's the whole point of it. But there is a big however. I don't know if you can hear the police car coming down me, right off of Carmenita. Anyway, however, everything in life exhibits diminishing marginal utility. What does that mean? Eventually, we end up bored or dissatisfied with what once made us happy. When you were a little kid, you know it, and you all know this, you wanted that toy. You know the toy I'm talking about. You wanted it really badly. And when the winter holiday came, when Christmas time came along or Hanukkah came along, it was like, yes, if I get this doll, if I get this toy, if I get this new game, if I get this system, I will be happy forever and ever and ever. And you get it. And you're happy for a while. And then you're no longer happy with it. That is the idea of diminishing marginal utility. And this is one way that the capitalist system that we have works. This is one of the assumptions, is that we can produce as much as we want for everyone, but because of unlimited wants, we can continue to sell and sell and sell. Most of you are aware there's a story about people who win the lottery, who win millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. And later on, these social scientists come back and look at their level of happiness. And for most of them, they have an initial rush of happiness that lasts for a few months. And then suddenly, even with all that money, it falls down, and they're just as happy with all that money as they were without all of that money. Now, intuitively, that sounds wrong, especially, for us who don't have a great deal of money. But it's been borne out over and over again, and many lottery winners have complained bitterly how the worst thing to ever happen to them in their lives was winning the lottery. It's kind of like Calvin and Hobbes, where Calvin is taking a bowl of cereal and says, another bowl of chocolate frosted sugar bombs. The second bowl is always the best. The pleasure of my first bowl is diminished by the anticipation of future bowls. And by the end of the third bowl, I usually feel sick. Well, maybe you shouldn't use chocolate milk. I tried cola, but the bubbles went up my nose. This is a very sophisticated cartoon aimed at children, aimed more at adults. And this is an excellent example of the idea that I've been sharing with you. Now, when we have then diminished marginal returns, that is to say, when people are bored or don't want the items anymore because they see something better in the horizon, productivity eventually dips because they're not going to be, let's say, making that model car anymore or making that type of shoe anymore. And, it just makes us feel less overall satisfaction, and we'll want something new. So once again, everything in life, according to economists, exhibits diminishing marginal utility. All right, folks, that ends the review of Chapter 2. And for tonight, I have here is to study sections 8 to 13th if you have the 4th edition, or 8 to 15th if you're using the 8th edition of the textbook, and how people interact and the principles discussed in class today. You'll be asked to answer the questions based on the quick questions you can find here. Actually, they're on my website, period 3 or period 6 on Google Classroom, and the material will be due on or before midnight Thursday, September the 3rd. Now, I haven't put this material up. I will be putting it up this afternoon, and so you can get a hold of it after you've done your reading. By the way, there is a reading in your textbook on Adam Smith. It's an FYI, and that's something that you yourselves should also be checking out. So that's it.